Some were just boys, like Private Homer Blevins of Fresno, California, who at 17 was the youngest in the platoon. Most had volunteered for service in the months following America's entry into the World War the year before, and many others had been drafted, trained, and added to the unit in the past few weeks. Fresh replacements for those lost to snipers, shelling, mustard gas, or the influenza of a harsh winter that had dragged on well into spring. It was Monday, May 27th, 1918, a detail almost universally unnoticed by soldiers who had long before shed their previous life's mental dividers of work weeks and weekends. Time passed in clusters of days marked only by greater or lesser mortal danger. 10 days of cheating death in the trenches, 10 days rest billeted in drafty barns and cottages of some anonymous French village, then 10 days in reserve up closer to the front, where the perils of mustard gas and aerial bombardments were often worse than at the front lines. Then over again the sequence repeated, and for how long, nobody knew. 3 days earlier, this monotonous cycle was finally broken as these soldiers were ordered from the front lines and trucked 12 miles away to a training area for battle rehearsal. As General Pershing promised 6 weeks before in his send-off speech to the division officers, the 1st Division had been chosen out of the 5 then in France to enter that great battle of the greatest war in history. Rumors had since circulated among the men about when the great battle would finally come, and where, and which unit would get the coveted assignment. Back at the rehearsal area, these men had learned it was their regiment, of the division's 4, ordered to retake the prize of Cantigny from the German army. Field Order Number 18, which had descended from the typewriter of a young lieutenant colonel on the division staff, George C. Marshall, laid out the attack operation in great detail, and its 39 pages of supply lists, mission assignments, and artillery barrage schedules formed the script for history. 13 months after President Wilson had called them to service in the most terrible and disastrous of all wars, and 10 months after landing in France to join the Allied cause, the Americans, the Yanks, Sammies, or doughboys, were finally entering the fight, and the soldiers of Company E's 3rd Platoon would be in the first attack wave going over the top. The first day of battle, J-Day, was set for Tuesday, May 28th, and with 2.5 days of battle plan rehearsal complete, most of the regiment would be spending May 27th, J-1, relaxing back at the training area before moving up to the front lines after dark. The military use of D-Day to designate the start of a combat operation did not begin until August 1918, 3 months later. But for the men of Company E, there would be no rest. The 4 companies of their battalion had been ordered again to the front the previous night, May 26th, 2 nights before the attack, and a full day earlier than the rest of the regiment. Having taken over the front-line trenches well after midnight, some being rustled awake by Sergeant Milner, had managed to squeeze in 2 or 3 hours of sleep, but many had found no rest, and fatigued by the night's long march, they were running on fumes. As dawn struggled to break, their collective hope was for a quiet 24 hours on the front lines before the shrill whistles blew the next morning at 0 hour, sending them over the top and into the maelstrom of war. Up and down its length, the trench began stirring with hushed activity as soldiers sat up, buckled on their canvas web belts, hung their gas masks over their chests, and strapped on their cold steel helmets amid stretching yawns and gulps of cold coffee. Sidestepping slowly through them, moving from soldier to soldier, his stout frame buckled tight in his officer's Sam Brown belt with holstered Colt .45 pistol, was their platoon leader, Lieutenant Charles